The Rock and Roll and Coffee Show is brought to you by Retroactive, located at Broadway at the Beach in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, taking you back to the 70s, 80s, and 90s. ShopRetroactive.com. Pick up your bottle of the Rock and Roll and Coffee Show Hot Rockin' Hot Sauce now at Retroactive or rnrcoffeeshow.com.
It's the Rock and Roll and Coffee Show. Yeah, with Joe.
So Eric, let's start with some of the latest things I've seen you doing. You recently played with Pump5, is that correct?
That is correct. Pump5 and another band in the making called The Project.
Right. And I want to get into that, but talk to me about the Pump5 because they've been around for a little bit, haven't they?
Right. They've been around for like 24 years.
Yeah, more than a little bit.
Great band. The singer Steve kind of has a Robin Zander vibe about him. He writes great pop rock songs. And my friend Jimmy, who's doing the Project band that I had done some tracks for, was in their video for Death of Me. He had called me and was like, hey, if you're looking to get some extra gigs, my friends at Pump5 are looking for another guitarist. And I was like, huh, okay. And I checked out the songs, kind of looked at their dates they had. And it looked like they had traveled to like Japan and all these other places. I was like, oh, they look pretty legit. And I ended up talking to Steve, and he gave me like 5 songs to learn. And I went up to LA, or kind of Riverside area where they're at, and jammed with them. And they're like, great, well, here's another 15 songs. We, booked a gig in 2 weeks. So I had, woodshed on their songs. Before the interview today, we were talking about our mutual friend Pete Evick and how he sprung a gig on you where you had to learn a bunch of songs. I think it's easier when it's songs you've heard before, or heard your whole life, even if you've never attempted to play it. In this situation, his songs were great, but I had never heard any of them. So it for a guy like me with an old brain, like I'm a little rusty. I had to work at it. Man. It took about 5-6 hours a day of going over their tunes before I was comfortable enough going up and doing the show with them. But it was we did the Lemon Festival in Pomona, California. Was my first gig, and it went well. We had a good time, and I guess they're going to book more shows in the future.
Are you going to do the shows with them in the future?
Yeah, if as long as the Stephen Pearcy band will be, of course, my first priority. This winter will be my 25th anniversary in Stephen's band. So really, that's like my main source of income and my main gig. So as long as I'm not out doing something with him, I'm available to do, other things. But
now that features Alex Kane as well, right?
Yeah. So I got to meet Alex Kane. Initially, I was called about this gig because he apparently couldn't do it. He said he couldn't do it. So that was another thing. Like I had learned all his parts, all the leads and the solos, and then like about 3 days before the gig, he's like, "Oh, surprise! I can do it." But that was actually awesome because then we both got to play it, and it gave the band a more full sound, and they were able to like sound more like their record Paradise that's out. Check it out on YouTube. But Alex was a good dude, a Chicago guy. And, he's pretty well known. I of course, remember him from Live Sex and Death.
Life, Sex, Death, yeah.
Yeah, in the 90s. And he couldn't have been nicer.
Yeah, he's been on the show before. Great guy. He'll talk, though. I'll tell you that. His episode, it went probably about 3.5 hours.
Wow.
I had to do part 2. Part 1 and part 2.
The sequel.
Yeah. But yeah, great guy. Great guy. That's awesome. Now you're also doing, you had mentioned The Project. What is The Project? Is that like a new band for you, or what is that?
Kind of. I mean, James Davis, who's a friend of mine, he had been doing basically a studio project where he was making a record and he was trying to get the best people he could to play on it. Dennis Hill, who is the guitarist at Face to Face, is also a great producer, and he helped James produce the project, and he contributed vocals and played a lot of guitar stuff on it. And he also had produced the Pump 5. So they're all kind of connected in a way. And these guys have been asking me for some time to play some solos or something on their music. And to be honest, I was a little bit elusive, as far as availability with them and doing it. And they wanted me to like come up to where they were at, which I'm not super comfortable. They were like, "Hey, we want you to come up and throw down some solos, and we're going to film it, and we're going to do all this stuff." And I was like, I think sometimes when you get to a certain level, you don't want to let anybody think you suck or something. You know what I mean? And you're like, I'd rather do that at home and have more time to make it awesome, which is the truth, really. I mean, if you give me like 2 days to come up with some solos for your song, it'll sound better than if you put me on the spot and have to come up with one in like 5 minutes.
So you're not a great improvise guy.
I can improvise, but I'm more like I have to hunt around and find what I'm going to do.
I gotcha.
I of course I improvise because I write music and I make albums, and you have to kind of improvise to a degree just to come up with anything. But when you start throwing in the, hey, we're going to film it, we're going to document it, then it's just like, it's a little more, for me, a little more stressful. I mean, I've been playing guitar for 35 years, but I'm not like the go-to studio guitarist for Steely Dan or something. You know what I mean? That's doing all the session work in LA and does 3 sessions a day. I have other things I do in my life. I've been playing for Stephen. I write music for him when we're off the road, and have other things. But as far as being ready to play on anybody's track at any time, not really. You know what I mean? Of course I could do it, and I did it, and they were very happy with the work I did. But just for me personally, it's better because I do have at least a home studio. Most guitar players do at this point, where you can have at least a digital studio. And it was just better for me to kind of really take their song in, each song at a time, and play what was best for the song and try a bunch of different stuff. And what I ended up with, they were happy with. And what they ended up doing instead was actually making a music video for it. So the song Death of Me does have a music video where all of us meet for the first time that played on the song, and we just kind of lip sync or whatever the song for the video. Jimmy DeAnda came in on drums. He played drums on it. Scott Shiflett, who his brother is in the Foo Fighters.
I was going to say, it sounds a little Foo Fighter-ish.
Yeah, definitely. Those guys have that kind of pop. I mean, Foo Fighters is also, I would consider, like a pop rock kind of band of sorts, but it definitely had that kind of vibe. But I'm in my 50s. I was a 90s guy, so I mean, they're speaking my language as far as music I grew up listening to and everything. And I love all forms of rock, for the most part. But yeah, we did the video, and it was really well received. There's some magic to that song. Like, people really dig the song, and they love Dennis's voice. Typically he's a guitarist, but he sang on this track, and he just has a really cool vibe to his voice. Where that's going to go, I'm not 100% sure. I heard they booked the first show in August, and they want me to play in the band. I didn't perform on the whole album. I probably played solos on like 3 of the songs. Death of Me, I gave some rhythm tracks to as well. But I'm going to have to learn their songs too for this. But all this scheme of things is good for me, just to keep my chops up and do something different. I mean, I can't just play, Rat songs for the rest of my life, even though that was awesome. But no, you got to do other things too to stay, well-rounded. Right.
Well, speaking well-rounded, I mean, you grew up with music in your family a little bit, right? Your mom played piano, classical piano.
She did. We always had a piano in the house, and whenever my mom was feeling feisty, she would get on the piano and she would play she would have her jams, classical jams that she would do, Moonlight Sonata, these songs, and she played with a lot of passion, and the piano was loud as hell in our house, and it was like, oh, mom must be in a mood or something, she's playing piano. But yeah, I mean, I must get a little bit of a from her. My dad played, I think, trumpet in high school. Everybody had like an instrument, but nobody like went full pro with their music abilities or anything. I was the only one crazy enough to try to pursue that to their just.
Did you ever get into the piano or no? Did you just go straight to
I
guitar?
I started on piano. That was kind of the arrangement because I wanted to play guitar. Uh, Being an '80s kid and MTV, I wanted to be a rock guy, and the only way that they would agree to let me play guitar is if I learned piano first. So I had to do like 2 years of piano lessons before they would agree to get me a guitar or let me do a. So I was actually all right. I mean, I was reading music, I was performing in recitals, but once I got the electric guitar, that was kind of it. I just was going down the rock road from there, and I moved out of my parents' house when I was pretty young, like 17 or something. So I didn't really have a piano around anymore. I was just kind of couch surfing with my guitar, and that was that.
And then you found Eddie Van Halen was one of your influences, and George Lynch and Jakey Lee, I think.
Right. I would say all the West Coast dudes, yeah, Eddie Van Halen, Jakey Lee, George Lynch. Those are probably our favorite guys. But then also Metallica. Like Metallica was a big influence on me and my friends when we were 15 years old. One of the coolest things was going to the Monsters of Rock concert, and I think it was 1988. And my dad actually drove us all, me and my friends all up there. But we were young. We were like 15, 16. And we got to see, they had pretty much all our favorite rock bands on one bill. It was like, Van Halen was headlining it, and Metallica, Dokken, and Scorpions. And I mean, that was a pretty like historic concert.
It was. Kingdom Come was there too.
Right. Kingdom
I,
Come.
I saw that show in Miami. We're probably about the same age. My dad took me to that show as well.
That's cool. I'm 52.
Yeah, so am I. I'll be
Nice.
53 this year. So yeah, we're
Yeah.
right same area.
Awesome. Yeah, it was I don't know how the show was in Miami. That the LA Coliseum was. I heard a lot of the shows were the same, where there was pretty much a riot for Metallica pretty much every gig. And there was no exception, Los Angeles, when they started playing, everybody just, not us, we were up in like the lows, but you could see a ton of people just broke down the barriers and rushed the stage. And, they were definitely something different as far as like leading up to that point. 80s rock had gotten pretty glammed up and pretty boy and bubblegum, and suddenly this band Metallica comes along that kind of looked more like me and my friends, like straggly haired, zit faced, kids. So I just started gravitating to them, and loved thrash metal at that point, and yeah, so to see that concert was something else. And of course, Van Halen at that point had Sammy Hagar, but it was still super exciting to see Eddie Van Halen play live. So I've probably seen Van Halen as a kid maybe twice. I think I saw that show, and I saw the OU 812
Okay.
concert. Never got to see him with David Lee Roth.
Yeah, I didn't either. My first concert though was Van Halen 5150. I saw that tour.
Nice.
So that was a great one. Now you grew up in San Diego, right?
For the most part, yeah. I was born in New Jersey, moved to LA when I was 10 for 2 years. And then, so from about 12 on, I've been in San Diego.
So what was the scene like in the San Diego area? I know LA had the glam scene going on at that time, but was the same thing going on in San Diego, or did you travel? Did you go up to LA, or how'd that work?
We occasionally went to LA. I was horrified to go to LA at first when I was I had been in bands from like 17 or 18 years old, but going to LA was intimidating for me because I knew so many big bands and hotshot guitar players, and everybody was from LA, and I was kind of just starting out. And I could definitely play in a band and play kind of radio friendly songs or whatever, but I wasn't like an extraordinary guitarist or anything. So I was always just nervous to go up there. We played most of our shows in San Diego. Our singer, his name was Andy Milner, and his dad was a famous actor, Martin Milner, who starred in Adam 12 police show. And um, at that time, he was playing RoboCop's dad on the RoboCop TV show. But Andy was a popular guy here in North County, and he had a lot of friends. And so when we had our band together, there was always like a couple hundred people that would come see us, which was great for our band. Like we could play like, 3 gigs a month, and they'd be packed or sold out. And we even had like residencies at some places around here too. We were kind of a big fish in a small pond. But as the 90s progressed, you could see things changing where like DJs were starting to be more viable for these venues and stuff. And it was like less live music being played. Certainly like rock music was being looked down on more. Like pop punk started becoming more popular. And, I call it like Malcolm in the Middle rock. You're not the me now. Blink 182 is a band that's from my town, and we're all the same age. And like I knew those guys. They used to rehearse at DML and Escondido, where we were rehearsing for a bit. And I didn't really like that music, and I didn't think those guys were any good as far as musicians go. I thought they were silly, and I was like, but they had a lot of friends too. Like their high school backed them, and maybe even had bigger connections than I know, like through their parents or something. But they just exploded. And there's been that is one time in my life where I was like jealous of a band. I have to say I was legitimately like jealous of their success, of having to watch them skyrocket to that level, because I just thought there was nothing redeeming about them, in my opinion, at that point. Now later on, I've come to appreciate a few of their songs, maybe, and I've gotten away from feeling that way. But I remember at the time it used to just drive me nuts that they were popular and people like that stuff.
Yeah.
Just being
Was this your Voodoo? Was that the name of this band?
Yes, that is the name of the
Okay.
band.
Okay. Because that band, now you knew Stephen back then, and he helped that band a little bit, right?
That's true. He was always trying to be helpful towards me. He had a house right across the street. I don't know if we had mentioned that in this interview, but when I was 15, Stephen moved in across the street. Literally, our garages faced each other in Carlsbad, California. So when I had a garage band, he would hear us because we would wait till he came home. Like, okay, fire it up. And we
knew
would
what you were doing.
trying to get his attention. But he was like, "Hey, yeah, I should record you," because he had, I think, like a reel to reel recording mechanism or something. And Chris Hagar, who recently sadly passed away a few weeks back, he was a part of this story too, because he was a very close friend of Steven's, and he was in the original Mickey Rat with Jakey Lee and Steven before Rat had moved to LA. Or I think he had even moved up with Steven to LA initially before he ended up leaving to do Rough Cut with Matt Thorne. But at this time, like I think Rough Cut maybe was already wrapping up, and he would hang down at Steven's in San Diego, and he would help him make demos for arcade or whatever was going on at the time. And so he would have Chris engineer demos for my band, and we would have like a drum machine, and we would program it. We couldn't like record like real drums, but we could do all the other stuff, and Andy would sing on it. And we used those first demos to give to the local radio station, and next thing you know, they were like, even though it was a drum machine, they were playing our songs on the radio, which was cool. And then we would name drop Steven, like, yeah, we're produced by Stephen Pearcy, Rat. They're like, oh, that's cool. And next thing you know, we're like getting gigs opening for like most of the national acts that would like come through San Diego. So he definitely helped us get some notoriety locally. So it was very cool of him.
What do you think he saw in you? Because he stuck with you later on.
Sure. I think that, well, for one, I was joking because I think he thought I was older than I was. I don't think he thought I was 15 or 16. He probably thought I was more like 18 or 19. I had long hair at that point and whatever. That made me look a little older. But I think he saw a little bit of himself, to be honest. Especially my attitude, like, yeah, I'm gonna make it, and this and that. He had that same positive attitude that got him, where he's at. He never gave up or had any doubts that he was gonna make it. And back then, I was kind of the same way. However naive that might have been, you know what I mean? We are two different generations. Steven's 17 years older than me, so he had gone and done this decades before I had, at a peak time to go and do such a thing, where it was kind of winding down by the time I was, getting a rock wagon. Yeah, I think he saw a little bit of himself. We just had similar personalities and interests, and he just always looked out for me. And then about a decade later, Ratt was on a hiatus, and this is after they had reunited, I think, in 1999 for a bit. And then they had another falling out, and Stephen went solo, and Ratt hired Jizzy Pearl to sing for them. They were out touring as Ratt with Jizzy singing, and Stephen was out on a solo tour. He was actually, I remember, he was also calling his band Ratt too. He was like, well, if they could do that, then I'm Ratt featured Stephen Pearcy. During this time, he had some issue with his guitarist at the time, and they were out on the road, and I get a call from him, and he goes, hey, he's like, I need you out here. I need you out here to play guitar. And I was like, what? Because this I felt was not in my wheelhouse, to play. Because as you remember, in the 90s, like, nobody was playing guitar solos.
Sure.
It was like very basic pentatonic type things, or you had a wah pedal, or you just did not do anything that elaborate on guitar. The record labels were not looking for that. They were looking to put the 80s behind them. So I was not like up to snuff on playing like Warren DeMartini or something at the time. So I really was just like, this is a bad idea. But at the same time, and then I was worried that even that he would even take care of me out there. I overthink things, sometimes I can be very cowardly and fearful. For some reason, I go, whatever. At this point in my life, I was 27. My voodoo had kind of fallen by the wayside, and I really didn't have much else to lose at that point. So next thing you know, I agreed, and I was on a plane out to Chicago to play a show with them. And they were in the middle of tour. They had a full-blown tour bus. They had all that stuff, and I had a great time. I'll tell you that. I didn't play the songs that great. But also we weren't playing all the Ratt songs like we are today. He was probably doing more of a mix of arcade, a couple of Ratt songs, some covers. So, I did the best I could, and I got by enough that I remember after the first show, we were on the bus, and he was kind of buzzed, but he was like, man, that was great. He's like, you could play with me as long as you want to. Always remember that. He said that.
That's so great.
Yeah. And so I was like, oh, all right. And so, we just kept plowing through. We toured a good amount in those first few years until Stephen, I think he reunited with Ratt again in like 2007, about 5 years after we had been out playing solo. And that's when I would hit these like hiatuses where he would be out with them, and I'd have to kind of get by some other way, He did push me to do he's like, you should do your own band, I'll help you get a demo or whatever. He was always super nice. I mean, I really have to say he was always been so cool to me. And I did try to do that and realized how hard it is to start your own thing from scratch. It's nearly impossible to get anybody. And if it does, in my situation, most of the people that were going to know me are going to know me from the Stephen thing. So they were kind of expecting it to sound like Ratt. And I was more like trying to do like a Nine Inch Nails thing or something, and they weren't digging it. I'll say that. Like I wasn't getting the support of those people, and it just wasn't really going anywhere. So eventually, I had to kind of that fell away. But Stephen and Ratt is a precarious relationship, where they get back together and do things, but then there's typically some kind of falling out, and they end up like separating. And he always has a solo career to fall back on or do whatever. And so I always end up getting pulled back into the mix, basically. So, yes, I've been playing with them for almost 25 years, but there's certainly been a good, 6 or 7 of those that we were hardly playing as the solo band. Maybe a couple. We were notorious for doing like winter runs. He would call it the Stephen Pearcy XXXmas tour. We would do this super dangerous tour, like the worst time to go on the road, November, December, where it's blizzards everywhere. But we always had a few gigs, and I always had something to, look forward to at some point. Most recently, he and Warren DeMartini surprised everybody, and they're doing a version. They're basically it's kind of like a Plant Page, like Robert Plant, Jimmy Page got together to do a tour. That's how they're kind of viewing it. It's not called Ratt. It does include a couple guys from our solo band, most recently Blas Elias, who's been a great addition to our band, and then Matt Thorne's on bass. So they are using those two guys, and they brought in Carlos Cavazo. So Johnny Monaco and I got pretty much set
to the side. Yeah, I wanted to get into that with you, but since we're talking about it now,
sure,
we'll just talk about it. So
yeah.
when all that came up, did he approach you guys first and say, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing this," or was it more of a, "Here's what's going to happen"?
Right. I did hear about it because the guy who got them on this was the M3 promoter. He had the financial backing to put this proposition together that Warren, he's a huge Warren fan, and he wanted to see Warren and Stephen together again. And it hit whatever that magic number was, the ding, 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 ding. It hit, and they agreed to do this. And then while they were agreeing to it, they're like, well, let's do a warm-up show before this show. They ended up playing the Mohegan Sun and that one. They've only really done like 3 gigs so far. But to answer your question, I kind of knew something was in the works. And, Stephen also was considering having me be a part of that. But I didn't think it was going to happen because it's always been a us and them type thing with the solo band. The other guys in Ratt have never been happy that Stephen has a solo band that he can go and make a living off of. It's just, I think it's a lack of control that they end up having over him, that if things get shitty, he can always just leave and do his own thing anyway. And they probably resent him for that, I would imagine. So I'm not their friend. They know me and we're civil. I mean, and like I will say, Carlos Cavazo has been nothing but cool to me every time I've ever met him. He's a super cool, humble guy. But as far as the OG guys, I think there's always going to be a little resentment. And I make records with Stephen. You know what I mean? I'm the guy who writes the solo albums with him.
That's so silly, though. I think it's. I know some other situations that are similar to that, to what you're in.
Yeah. I understand it. I've accepted it. I wouldn't expect anything different. You know what I mean? I know as far as what I've ascertained from Warren's position, he wants to be there with a guy from his generation. You know what I mean? A guy that he's known his whole life. He would rather have his bro Carlos there than, somebody. I'm 10 years younger than Warren. You know what I mean? He's not looking for a 90s kid to come play for, not a kid anymore, but
yeah.
There is that difference of where we're from and the school we're from. And so, of course, I never thought for a second he was going to agree to play with me on the other guitar thing, even though Stephen would have liked that. Stephen has always wanted me to be the other guy. And every other version of Ratt that's gone on, he was like, you're going to be the other guy. And he's always said that because he's felt, even though I don't remotely look like Robin Crosby whatsoever, he always thought that we had a similar personality, Robin and I, and that our playing was very similar, our styles. So he always wanted me to be in that position, but it's not really up to him. It's a business.
Sure.
And those guys typically, it's a majority rule situation. So the more original Rat guys involved, the more he's outvoted on such a thing. With this situation too, I mean, they have to make that work, and there's concessions that have to be made. And even if he wanted me to be a part of that, that's just a business thing. Warren says no. What are you going to do? Not do it because he doesn't want to take me? Of course not. You know what I mean? No problem. Okay, that's off the table. All right. You want to do Carlos? All right, let's move. So they're doing that. We still had shows on the books. A few of them got flipped to DeMartini shows. They do ask like almost twice as much money for that version, so they're not probably going to get as many gigs. And Stephen, he needs to keep working. I mean, he can't just pick and choose, 5 or 10 shows a year. I mean, his lifestyle and everything, he needs to have that income coming in. So I would imagine as long as he's staying active, he's going to have some solo shows happening. And we probably have about, I have at least 9 or 10 more shows with him this year. And I think the Pearcy DeMartini guys have about 7 shows as well. So
that's about equal.
It's about equal.
Yeah. That's understandable. And with Carlos was a member of Rat for a little bit.
He was.
So that makes sense.
And people love the Infestation record, that they did.
Great record.
It's a great record, and he was a big contributor to that record. I think, I don't know exactly, I don't have the record in front of me to know exactly what songs, but I was under the impression that he wrote at least half of the songs on there, guitar wise. I could be wrong on that, but he was a major contributor, and he was key to getting that record finished. And he was a good choice. I mean, not just because of the blonde hair and the flying V, but he suited what they needed at the time. And him and Warren play well together. That sort of thing doesn't bother me because, again, like when I think back to my youth before I even played guitar, and you're just air guitaring in your bedroom. Of course, I had the Quiet Riot Mental Health record when I was 12.
Right.
Even learning how to play guitar, I remember learning his guitar solo that was on Metal Health, that Battle Axe jam. He had don't. I would always play that on guitar. So I don't mind, stepping aside for, an iconic guitar player like that from my youth. It would hurt my feelings. It hurts my feelings a lot more when it's a nobody taking my spot.
Some random guy, yeah.
I was a little more. I was a little bummed when him and Stephen and Juan won the name back in 2019, and they were going to do their thing, and he was like, "You're going to be the other guy," and then kind of the same thing happened where Juan goes, "No," he's like, "Nobody from our solo bands, no solo bands," and at this point, it was another business move where you got 2 guys 50-50 holding the name. And you have to make some concessions. So they ended up, they did get Jordan Ziff. I wouldn't call him a nobody. He's actually as pretty well known in the shredder guitar world as one of the newer, younger shred guys. The other dude wasn't as known, but he looked a lot like a short Robin Crosby. Like if you blinked your eyes.
Yeah.
It's like, well, shit, I don't look anything like Robin Crosby. But I was a little
different.
It was a little different. So just being in full disclosure, I was resentful of that because I was like, well, that's BS because I had put in so much time, and I was in my mind, I didn't have a crystal ball to see what was going to happen in our country or what was coming down the pike. But it looked to me like him and Juan got the name and they were going to ride off into the sunset. My career was over, and it was just in a toss of a coin. I'm not a part of it, and after you put that kind of time into something, I was definitely bummed out. I had to pick up side jobs and stuff. Luckily, the gig economy was kind of going, so I started driving for Uber and Lyft and doing things any probably musician would do to get by. And things looked like they were going okay for them, but then Steven hit a pitfall and he had some notoriously bad gigs that were televised where his drinking, which I'm only saying this now because he has stopped drinking. The guy hasn't drank in years.
That's
But
awesome.
this was, 6-7 years ago, and he was off the wagon, and he had some bad gigs that happened, and then COVID hit, and that was it. Like, everything shut down. I did leave out during this time. It took me about a year to get another gig. I got the gig in the band Bow Wow Wow. Lee Gorman, who's the original bassist, and he was also the original bassist in Adam and the Ants. Somehow we got connected, and he offered me the Totally 80s tour with them in the Motels. And so I had to learn all these Bow Wow Wow songs, which is a whole nother. I only knew I Want Candy. That's the only song.
I was going to say, I couldn't tell you a Bow Wow Wow song.
They have a
Except
ton of
that
songs. Right. They have a ton of songs I've never heard of. And I don't normally play that rockabilly kind of whatever, but at that point, I was ready to take anything just to get back in the game. You know what I mean? What, a tour? Okay. So it took me about a year, and I was out with Bow Wow Wow for about 2 months, and Stephen was out with Juan, and then the pandemic hit, and everything shut down, and it all ended for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I think around 2021, Stephen something happened with Juan and that thing where they were at a disagreement over something, and Stevens decided to start booking solo shows again. So we were back out playing again, and it was kind of sketchy because there was a lot of propaganda with the whole pandemic and everything. You didn't know how deadly this thing was, or like whatever. But I don't think we cared. I mean, we'd rather die playing music and going out and uniting people. And we are not the kind of guys that could just stay in our homes for the rest of our life, in a bubble or whatever. So we went out there and just started playing again. And then the world kind of opened up more and more. Jason Green entered into the picture, who's getting pretty famous, actually, with his podcast.
With his show, yeah.
Yeah. But Jason came in, and he was kind of instrumental, I would say, for us getting the lineup that we have now.
Okay.
Chris Hagar, who I was talking about earlier, I think was playing with us at the time around probably 2022. And he had got really sick when we were out playing, like really bad, where we were playing in Utah, and he got so sick he got hospitalized there. He couldn't play the show. I had to play with just me on guitar. And he stayed there for like 2 weeks in that hospital. And that's when Johnny Monaco came into the fold.
Okay.
Basically, Jason, that was his buddy that he did his podcast with. And he's obviously a capable, guitarist. And, he came in initially to replace Chris. And later, when we needed a drummer, because Scott Coogan, who was with us, ended up going back to Ace Frehley.
Okay.
Who I think that's who's his favorite guy to play for. Probably all the gigs I'd say Scott Coogan, not that I should speak for the guy. I'd say number one, he loved playing in Brides of Destruction with Nikki Sixx and Tracy Guns. He loved that. But Ace Frehley, being a huge Kiss fan, Scott loves playing for Ace, and I think he would always pick Ace as his gig. And he ended up going back to him, and that's when Jason once again got one of his Vegas buddies that he knew in the band, and entered Blas Elias.
You couldn't ask for a much better drummer than Blas.
No,
in my opinion.
no, he is pretty incredible, and I could sense where our whole band just kind of stepped up a level once we got these other guys. We've always had the Stephen Pearcy band's predominantly been a ragtag bunch over the years. Like, I've watched a lot of people come and go from the
I'm sure.
And there's been times where we just barely got somebody in there to have the gig. But now we're at a point where we had real guys that play professionally all the time, and we're able to come in and, do the songs justice and put on a good performance. And we just started getting taken, more seriously. And we've actually kind of had the Rat moniker behind us for a lot of the last couple of years. It's like Stephen Pearcy's Rat.
Yeah.
which I don't know about that, but the crowd was accepting of it. I think, we probably would have even possibly gone on to be Rat, so it was interesting how things just recently have taken a turn with Warren coming in and the switch happening. And who knows, man? I don't really know all what's going to happen. Again, I got that feeling like, oh, this could be it. This could be over. But in 2019, when Juan and Stephen won the name, I don't agree with the move they made, but they ended up firing Warren at that time because Warren wasn't interested in playing more than like 20 shows a year.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't think that 9 years later he's going to want to play more than 20 shows in a year. So, I think Steven's intention, as far as I can tell, is to do both things, similar to, Bret Michaels or Vince Neil or, any of these guys from his era that, of course, have the main band they're from and they have a solo career and they do both things because they can. And I'm assuming that he's going to continue to book solo shows alongside these Pearcy DeMartini shows.
You haven't had that conversation with them, clearly.
I have had the conversation, but what people say and what happens could be two different things.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
One thing I love about Steven is he always will put a glimmer of hope in your life that this isn't going to be bad forever.
Right.
We're going to be out doing it. Don't worry.
Yeah.
There's always something that he wants to do down the pike. He does want to do another solo record, and he's very serious about that. So it's been like at least 5 years since the last View to a Thrill record we put out. He's ready to do another one. He's like, we're going in a couple weeks. So right now we're getting those songs in the pile and picking out what are going to be the best two to start with or whatever. So that is getting put into action. So you will hear another solo record with he and I very soon. And I got shows with him. I mean, the last I heard, he wants to do another one of those dangerous Christmas tours. He's like, get me the Christmas thing. I'm not sure what'll happen with Blas Elias. He's November and December. He's usually tied down with the orchestra, the Trans-Siberian Orchestra. Last Christmas, we had Jimmy DeAnda come in and played in his place, and probably the same thing will happen this year.
Yeah. Okay. So, Steven's not getting any younger. None of us are, right? So, although this DeMartini Pearcy thing's going on, have you thought about what you're going to do after this?
Well, I was ready to go, hey, this might be the end of it for me, because the reality is, once you get in your 50s, the thought of starting an original band is,
Mm-hmm.
a rough thing. You're definitely not going to get any kind of major label behind you or anything, because they typically want to exploit a younger artist that they can, tie up in long record deals and own a big chunk of their career and get a longer return on their investment. Once somebody's in their 50s, it's like, well, how much can they expect to get out of them? And, mostly younger artists are the ones that are willing to get into a van and go out on the road for 9 months. Like, I'm kind of past that. Like, I could even accept if not that I would retire necessarily, but like, for me, I've been doing this for 25 years with him. Like, the traveling sucks. You know what I mean?
I hear that a lot.
I could see myself doing other things the older I get. I mean, my health isn't what it used to be. I don't know if I could put in what it takes to break a new band. But, right when this happened, next thing you know, Pump5 and The Project and these bands are hitting me up, and they, so I mean, I'm open to playing with other people, and I could get hired into some established band. It's possible. I mean, I am quite professional, at this point, as far as dependability and versatility, and I could pretty much play with anybody at this point. So I'm so grateful to him for giving me the chance to grow as a guitarist and a performer on stage. that that's a possibility, and that my name's been around long enough that people probably do know me. If they were looking for somebody, that my name might come up. So I would never quit. I'm too young. You and I are both too young to retire. You know
Right.
what I mean? Not too many people are retiring at 52. I would expect to keep doing this for another decade, to be honest. Now, in what capacity, I'm not sure. Watching Jason Green and his success with YouTube and everything, it's fascinating to me. Like, but I go, wow, there is like money in this. You know what I mean? So I am also branching into that world as you are. You have your show here, and I'm interested in doing that sort of thing too. 2 years ago, the classic metal show, Chris Aiken had approached me after me doing some interviews on their show. He said he wanted to do his own Chris Aiken Presents. How would I like to be his co-host? And I was like, something I had never done before. But I said, what the hell? You know, I'm the kind of guy, when opportunity knocks, I always open the door. You know, I'm pretty
I'm
open-minded.
the same way. Kind of gets me sometimes though, but
Yeah, this has gotten me too. I mean, don't get me wrong, it hasn't been all roses, you know,
yeah,
doing the Chris Aiken Presents, because you got to be careful what you say on a live show. You know what I mean? Like, our show's not scripted, and we try to be edgy sometimes, and especially in comedy, you could say something that offends somebody, you know, or you could think
easily.
what you're saying is funny and they don't think it's funny.
Yeah.
And that's happened. I mean, it's caused uh, some of the things that have happened on the Chris Aiken Presents have caused problems in the band.
Oh
You know,
no.
just, and things that, you know, that Jason said on his shows caused him troubles with me. On, you know, it goes both ways. I think we both, just like the two kids on the block that end up pushing each other a bit, you know, and then become friends later, or whatever kind of schoolyard BS, you know, that
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
transpired or whatever. But at this point, you know, I don't have, you know, resentment or jealousy or anything like that. I mean, I have to respect him for, you know, what he's built his show into, and how he works it. You know what I mean? It's like you can learn something, you know, from the guy. And so that's kind of what I've just been kind of kicking back and watching how he does things. With this Chris Aiken Presents podcast, we've improved a lot in the last 2 years with the show. We've built it up a little. I'd like to see us get a little bigger audience. We're working towards that. We're making some changes with that right now, and I'm now starting to like put out some YouTube content also. Like, strangely enough, I have a show that is on YouTube now called Sea Glass Hunters.
You're hitting all the points that I've got noted here to hit with you. So keep going. Tell me about the sea glass.
So I have been blessed to move to the beach. Like, for most of the time I was in the Stephen Pearcy band, I was in a real rat hole of an apartment. It was in Oceanside, where I still reside, but it was on the east side, and I was probably the only white guy that lived in this complex. And it was just a beaten down, run down place. I didn't have a balcony. There was holes in the floor, and I lived there with my cat, and my cat had fleas. It was just a
Oh
flea-ridden
man.
dirt bag. I smoked cigarettes back then. The place was nasty.
Ugh.
Yeah, I lived there forever. But I wrote the albums there, and you know, whatever. It was my home. I was like, I just lived there by myself and didn't have anybody else to answer to, and it was fine. But about 5 years ago, it was during the pandemic, I met my now girlfriend Susan, and we dated for a while, and then about, I think, 2 years in our relationship, she said, "Why don't you make the leap and move in here with me?" Well, she happens to rent a condo right on the beach, like right on the Strand, which is amazing. And you know, I go, "Yeah, okay." So I moved. So I've been living here with her for about 3 years now, and it's amazing to. I never thought I would have an opportunity to even live in a place like that. We don't own it, you know what I mean? We rent,
Yeah.
we pay live here, but I mean, it's an experience in itself. And through my beach walks and stuff, I just discover so many interesting things on the beach that I thought other people would be interested in too, that maybe don't live on the beach themselves. Just for on a beachcombing level, the shells and the sea life that washes up on there. I had a fan ask me if I had ever found any sea glass, and I didn't know what they were talking about even. And then I realized sea glass is like basically rubbish, like just over the centuries, like bottles and glass things that make their way into the ocean eventually get worn down to like a smooth pieces of glass that look like, jewels or something. They're translucent and colorful and just interesting. And it's something I just found that I enjoy is like looking for that stuff.
So
And
wait,
so,
hold on a second. So
sure.
so the sea glass is trash?
It's basically, yeah, it's
I did
not,
not know that.
yeah, it's not, they're not rocks or anything that turn in. I mean, glass itself initially, I think, comes from like a sand mixture,
Hmm.
when humans make it or whatever. But yeah, over the thousands of years, I mean, God, humanity has been using glass bottles for tens of thousands of years. And the everything typically ends up in the ocean at some
Right.
point. And so, as far as like the age of some of these things, it varies. Like there's pieces of glass where I know this glass has not been in the ocean very long. It's hardly smoothed out. I more take it off the beach so somebody doesn't cut their foot on. But then I'll find these pieces that are amazing that are more like rounded and just super cool. Now, what do I do with the sea glass? Like that remains to be seen. I've been like kind of stockpiling it. We talked about Pete Evick earlier, our friend Pete Evick. Pete Evick has his Shining Soul candle company. So last year we kind of did a co-op where we made a sea glass candle
Remember
where
that?
he was selling this candle and I had mailed him the sea glass and he put the sea glass into the candle and like we sold a bunch of those and but I really didn't have that much sea glass at the time. It's kind of a rare thing to find, so
Okay.
that was a limited supply. I've grown to be better at finding it and I kind of got that down now. So I've been stockpiling it. I do intend to make art pieces with it. Most recently, I went and got these little treasure chests that I'm gonna like, put all these pieces on and see if I could sell those. I've had people asking me about it. But this show, I mean, I wouldn't have thought to do something like a YouTube show for it. But with the success of like Jason's show and also my girlfriend, like the stuff that she watches on YouTube, you would think no one would be interested in. And some of those shows have like 100,000 subscribers,
Yeah.
like there's a show Susan watches of this like old lady that goes to the same thrift store every week
Yeah.
and just gets stuff from the same store, and she has like 100,000 viewers. So I go, you know what? I'm just doing this. Uh, it's been interesting. So I basically initially I started doing the show just for my subscribers on Facebook, like because I have a small, probably 50 people that subscribe to that pay a subscription fee and to support me and anybody watching this can do that too if you want to on my Facebook, Erik Ferentinos subscriber group. But that the group was so small. I'm like, man, I want to like get into that YouTube world, of getting some monetary kickbacks from YouTube. So about 2 months ago, I started putting the episodes on there, and that it's a learning experience how to like do it right and make sure you have your video listed properly and dot your I's and cross your T's and everything. And if all goes well, people start watching it. And the first 12 episodes I did, nobody was watching it.
Right.
There was like 10 views on each one. And I don't know what I did different, but like this, what I call the second season, which is probably from like the 12th episode people are starting to watch it. Like it's starting to get a few thousand views on it. And I'm like, this is kind of starting to
That's good.
happen.
Yeah.
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 So I'm learning from it and I want to try other shows too. But, to answer your earlier question, like what I'm going to do, I want to segue into something like that where I could still use my creativity and just things I've learned, use my personality or whatever, and start putting some content on there that I can work from home
Sure.
and, do YouTube stuff. I mean, that
Yeah.
sounds
And I'm sure you'll always continue music. Like you said, you record at your house, right?
right. Even if I was to be doing content on YouTube, I could always do soundtrack stuff for it.
Mm.
I will always play. Um, we don't know what the future holds. One of the big topics on Chris Aiken lately has been AI.
Hmm.
Discussing AI and just
Have
what
you
it's
messed
done.
with AI music wise?
I've started, not music wise. The only thing we've done messing with it music wise is we did an episode probably like 6 months ago where Chris was demonstrating Suni, which is some
Hmm.
kind of AI that you basically just say what kind of song you want it to do, and you give it a couple key words or some direction as far as what the song was going to be about. And this thing spit out a theme song for us in like 3 seconds. I did the Chris Aiken Presents main theme when the song kicks in, and also for the Fright Bite, which is an offshoot of the Chris Aiken Presents, where a character, Count Cracula, hosts crappy movie watch-alongs with Chris Aiken.
Yeah, I saw that.
I did the theme for that also. But the end of the Chris Aiken show, the theme that comes on is the Suni AI version, where it sounds like Shame, Shame, Shame from Rat or something. And it's got like a kind of mainstream sounding singer that just basically, it's funny lyrics and whatever, but it was scary as hell that this thing was able to spit out a song like that fast. And we kind of just ended up like keeping that as the outro theme, even though I did do an outro theme, but this one Chris ends up putting in there. Um, yeah, that was about it. Now, as far as on an artistic level, I've most recently been messing with the Meta AI that's on Facebook.
Is that what you're using for your images that I've been seeing?
Yeah,
Okay.
for the last 2 weeks, I've started to take over the art direction for the show. We got into a slight tiff because Chris is great. He's a total IT master with like computers. He has his own IT company. He sets people up with networks and all that. But me myself, I'm like an artsy, creative person, music and art direction. So I think there could be a good marriage there of like helping each other to make the show better. But for like the last year, Chris has had like the same graphic up for the shows, which I made fun of him and said it looked like bloody binoculars or something. It
I
was
know
like
what you're talking about.
yeah, it looks like if you like you were driving and you hit a deer and there was blood all over the windshield, and then like there's these two binoculars, and it was like every episode had the same photo, even though he put different images in the two binoculars. You had to really look at it, and if you're like
Yeah.
on your iPhone looking up Chris Aiken Presents videos, you're like it all looks the same, and it was driving me insane. And I'm like, we got to change this. And so that's when I started messing around, and I let Meta scan my face, and then I started trying to make, just express myself through these AI photos. I mean, it again, this sucks for like artists because generally you would have to pay your buddy who's an artist to like make a poster for you or
Right.
something.
Right.
Most people suck at like Photoshop or doing things like that, but AI has just like changed the game with that. Where if you have you tried it yet yourself?
I
The
have
Meta,
not. I was gonna say, so what is this meta AI?
right? It's Meta AI. Like if you go into like, I think if you just go into Messenger on your Facebook
Okay.
and you say the word imagine and then give it some direction, it could spit out a photo. It can even do I figured out that it can do like a 4 second live clip. Like I go, imagine a 4 second video of me at a rock concert playing on stage, and it'll do it. It'll like
Huh.
actually spit out a little quick 4 second clip. For my subscriber page, I actually made a 3 minute spoof movie on one of the fright bites that we had, a snake out of Compton. I made a movie called More Snakes Out of Compton or something. Just I was messing around, but and made this 3 minute Count Cracula spoof on this movie that we had watched, and it's funny. Like I was able to like put these pieces together that you can download them once you make them in Meta, and then I was able to like put it into iMovie and actually like
Edit them.
make a movie. I mean, that's creative stuff that I enjoy doing. That's like another
So hold on. So does this scan your face?
it does scan your face.
Huh.
um I
Uh,
I had it scan Count Cracula's face, so Now, until I change it, every time I have it imagine something for the Chris Aiken show, it always appears to be Count Cracula and most of the this meta stuff. But this is only the second week that I've kind of taken over the direction with it. But so far, it's getting like a good response. People think it's funny, and
That is.
I do take it a step further. Like, let me ask you, like, are you familiar with on your iPhone now? Like, if you have a photo, you can hold your finger over like a person, and then
Yes, and it'll cut it out like a sticker.
That's right.
Yeah.
So what you're seeing on the Chris Aiken imagery, I'm actually having Meta maybe imagine a cool AI photo, but then I'm putting a sticker onto that. I'm like superimposing, me or Count Cracula or Chris Aiken, or somebody that I'm imagining that's close to Chris Aiken has not scanned his face yet for this thing. I asked him, and he kind of just ignored me.
I was going to say, in those pictures, I got what you're trying to get as Chris, but that didn't look like Chris.
It's not him, but it's a fat guy with long blonde hair and a beard. So that's as close as I get. But people kind of figure it out that it's us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't just totally cheat with it, but I have to use some creative direction for it. And just to get the Meta AI to do what you want is kind of an art in itself. Chris has joked like that, out of 10 people, 9 of them are going to be out of work, and 1 of them will still have a job if he knows how to work with AI.
That's probably true.
Yeah, it's there is some truth to that. I think even though it's almost evil in a sense, or seems like some kind of black magic or witchcraft that this thing can even do what it does and do it so quickly. There's no escaping it. The cork is out of the genie bottle.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's ever. The only thing I could see them doing at this point is making you pay money to use it. Like, it's been free so far, but soon it's going to be probably subscription based, like everything else has become.
I don't know if that'll fly as well, though, if that happens. I don't
Maybe
know.
not. Photoshop initially was free, if you recall. It came with all the Apple, any Apple computer you brought came with Photoshop. Now it's like $250 a year if you want to use Photoshop,
and it's subscription only. You can't just purchase it.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, and that's just business. Unfortunately, that's how business goes, and they're always going to find a way to monetize what they're doing and get you to pay. I mean, I think people are okay with paying for something as long as it's not astronomical, like if it's a couple bucks, they're okay with it. Once it starts like breaching the $10-20 mark for another app or something, it starts to be like you want to sidestep it. Like for Photoshop, I like a lot of other people, I use Photor, which is probably only like $40 a month, and it's like a dumbed down
I switched from Photoshop. I was a Photoshop user, and then when I couldn't use it anymore unless I subscribed, I switched to Affinity.
Okay.
You're familiar with that. But
I'll check that. Is that have a fee? How much is it?
It's a one-time fee. You can just buy it. And I think it was only like maybe $80.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad.
Maybe I'll go that
and
route.
It's real similar to Photoshop. It's a little different. There's a little bit of learning curve, but it's not too different.
Nice.
Called Affinity Photo, I believe.
I'll look at that because Photor is like $40 a month, and they hit me with that once a year. I don't use it that much. I probably use it like 3 times a year.
One thing I wanted to ask you, I thought I heard you talking about this little bitch once.
The ToneX, yeah.
Do you use this still?
I do. Not you're holding the ToneX 1.
Yes. Now, here's what happened with this thing. Let me tell you.
Okay.
So I purchased it to try it out. I used the Tech 21, the Sans Amp bass DI.
Nice.
So this looked pretty cool. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to give that a shot. I purchased it and I returned it.
Okay.
And then last week I was like, I just didn't know how to use it. Maybe I'll try it again. So I got it again, but I still don't know how to use it now. And I heard you talk about using it before. Right. So tell me about this.
Well, I'm not a big gear guy. You know what I mean? I'm pretty simple with everything. But the guy who turned me on to it was Matt Thorne, our bassist. He's like, you have to get this. And now I don't have the ToneX 1. I have the actual ToneX pedal that's a little larger, and it has the 3 buttons on it. Basically, he was excited about it because you could you could clone your amp basically, and make a profile for a real amplifier, and the thing does it amazingly well, especially if you have the right microphones. And Matt has his MT Studios that he's had forever up there in Burbank, and he has the best Royer mics and whatever. So I took my Splon, I play Splon amplifiers. I took my Splon amp up to his studio, and it has a feature where it basically, once the mics are set up, it can scan the amplifier. It actually runs its own program where like you'll hear a guitarist playing all kinds of weird songs, not weird songs, but like country licks and rock licks and like all these different things. It's so interesting how it works, but it takes about a half an hour for it to learn the amplifier. And you have to think your amp plugged in and mic'd up, and this thing, it runs the program into there. You hear the robot or whatever playing guitar through it, and then a half an hour later, your amp is now digitized and able to be put into a pedal and put up onto their library. So Matt, who has all kinds of great vintage gear, he's got like a 1971 Marshall whatever 800 or something, and or JP whatever. I'm not a gear guy, but he has all this cool stuff that he has in there. His whole studio, every good amp in his studio is now up on the ToneX site under MT Studios, including my Splon. Yeah, including my Splon head. And there's a ton of other users that have put their real amplifiers up on there too. Now, that enables me to like basically take my amp with me without bringing my amp.
Right.
Where I basically have like three, for example, the Pearcy gig, I have three buttons set up. One is my Splon amp with a little bit of delay on it. I think the second one is for when we do like Back for More or whatever. I'll have a little bit of chorus and it's like less gainy, a little delay. And then the third one I have set up is like a lead boost, like a 2.5 lead boost. And that's pretty good for the gig. So I just basically have the ToneX pedal on a pedal board. I have my Shure wireless unit, which is also a tuner. So I basically now just have two pedals on my pedal board that goes in my suitcase, and I go out and I basically have the same sound every night when I go to play. I have a cable that comes out of the out of the ToneX, and it goes into just the send, which is weird because you would think you'd have to have a send return thing going, but this thing just goes into the send and basically just uses the power of the amplifier. So if we, on our backline rider, I have a, Marshall 900s or whatever for the Pearcy gig. So I show up, they have those Marshalls set up. I throw down my pedal board, one cable into the send, and I got my sound coming out of that amp.
Right. And it's going into the send. Is the Marshall has no effect there, right?
Right, exactly. Okay. And so now I think the presence still works on it, but otherwise it's bypassing the circuits or whatever. So yeah, you're basically, none of the mids or trebles will work on there. However, the ToneX pedal that I have has those across. You could make little enhancements like that. It has bass and treble and mid and gain. You could add gain to it on the fly, and you could resave it or not save it, or whatever. The guy who Scott Splon, that builds the amplifiers that I use, came to our show in North Carolina recently, where his shop is located, and he was kind of freaked out. He showed up there, and they brought me a Splon guitar to use, and they brought a head to use, but I didn't have I just had my ToneX. I didn't have my any delay pedals or whatever. And I was like, well, I'm just going to run the ToneX into your Splon head because it has my effects in there. And he was like, oh my God, really? This is that pedal? Like, this is my amp in that pedal? I don't know. He wasn't really mad about it, but I think he was just taken back. Like, he just kind of, I don't know, looked at the future or whatever.
Yeah. So he was shocked how similar it sounded.
He was like, wow, that's the amp. I mean, it basically, and whatever amp I plug that into, it's going to be the same sound, which it modeled his Splon Quick Rod on there. I still tell people, to buy the guy's amplifier. You know what I mean? Yeah. I own multiple Splon heads. it's the future, you know, it's everything's just digital now. And there will be a point, I think, where people aren't using amplifiers anymore
Hmm.
at all. And now there's speaker cabinets coming out that are powered.
Mm.
Laney has some kind of new cabinet out that you can like EQ the speaker cabinet. It's basically made for modeling pedals, you know, so
Wow.
we're like a some crazy amount of watts too. This a 1100-watt speaker cab or something that you're just going to plug your modeler or whatever right into that thing and be able to EQ the speakers from there. It's pretty wild.
Yeah. See, my setup right now, bass wise, is simple. It's just that the Sans amp goes direct out to the PA. Like I don't have a
Right,
cabinet or anything on stage. I'm hearing it through the monitor.
right.
And it's a little weird at first, but it works. And you're not
Yeah,
carrying all this stuff around. I'm not lugging my Ampeg around.
we just we just got back from Canada this weekend and we played with Sebastian Bach and his bassist is your same setup.
Mm,
He's got his Sans amp and it sounded great. I mean,
yeah.
those are awesome.
Yeah.
ToneX, you could use the ToneX the same way. In fact, Matt's SVTs and stuff are modeled on there. You know what I mean? He's using his ToneX before he was doing your setup, but it's kind of the same, somewhat of the same premise. And he does still, I believe, have some direct signal that goes out as well. I don't know how I feel about bands that don't have any amplification going on stage. That it's all just through the house is a little weird. If you're around the front of the stage, you just don't feel the presence of the
Mm,
amps. I don't really like that. I like at least plugging into a stage amp and having something coming off onto there. But a lot of these bands now aren't bothering with it. For example, Steel Panther is another
mm.
band where there's no amps being used on stage. I don't think Metallica is even using any amps on the
Yeah.
stage, and possibly Iron Maiden. You know,
Yeah. We don't like our guitar players don't have amps either. They're direct.
and truth be told, it's like amps can be unreliable.
Yeah.
My gig with Pump 5 was almost a disaster because this Pomona Lemon Fest was your typical like street fair kind of gig, and the stage we were playing on was in a parking lot, and they had just probably a generator or something going on to power this small stage, and I don't know if there was like voltage spikes going on or whatever, but I had brought my amp, my Splon amp. I go, you know what, I'm going to go through my full blown amp. And I brought the cabinet, and as soon as it was plugged in for not like more than a minute, and all of a sudden it turned out that the fuse blew, but it must have
Mm.
had like a voltage spike come through and just zapped the amp right away. I was like, oh my God. And then I had another, my good friend Tris Mahaffey also makes amplifiers, and he has me using R&D one of his amps, and I had that there as a backup, and his got zapped a second,
Oh no.
went into some kind of like reset mode, and I was like, oh man. So I ended up having to use the ToneX. I had the ToneX, but that was like the third and final safety net that I had. And I go to the sound guy, I'm gonna need a direct out, dude. Whatever that thing is, and he stuck it in, and next thing you know, I was coming out the monitor, and we fired up, and the show went on. But if I didn't have that,
Saved you.
embarrassing. That was like going to be my first gig with those guys.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
so
I'm gonna check. I'm gonna try it again. I'm gonna see how this goes. I'm gonna check out, what did you say? MT what? Studios?
MT Studios, which is for Matt Thorne, MT Studios on the ToneX website, you can get Matt's entire studio is up there. I mean, he has amazing vintage bass rigs and guitar amps.
I'm gonna
And
check it out.
yeah, and anybody in the LA area looking to record, hit Matt up at MT Studios. But yeah, and I'm sure Pete Evick he's a big fan of your Tone X1. He has the same
He
setup
is.
that you have right there. He could probably,
Pete's hard to get a hold of though.
they've been playing a lot. We have shows coming up, the Voices of Metal. Some of them are like 2-3 shows in a row. I think probably like 5 of the gigs I have are going to be opening for Pete and Brett Michaels with
Cool.
Pearcy. So I'm really looking forward to those.
Nice, nice. All right. Well, I'm going to let you go here because we've been on a while, but I did want to ask you about um, been about 3 years, July 15th. You had a heart attack, correct?
That's true.
Now, tell me about that day. I mean, were you feeling bad going up to that show? Because this happened after a show, correct?
Right. Yeah, we were playing the Picktown Palooza in Ohio. And to answer your question, no, I had no idea that anything was wrong with me. We had performed the show, and basically I recall packing my stuff up, and I knew my blood pressure was high. I could sense it because I was just kind of getting a little annoyed. Somebody was like yelling my name from while I was trying to pack up. That's almost like a little annoying thing when I'm trying to get my stuff packed up. But shouting at the top of his lungs repeatedly my name, and I'm trying to like just get my stuff going. And I could sense my blood pressure was kind of going up. But one thing I had noticed was I was still like heavy breathing from the set, like it'd be like if you went on a jog or something, and then you were back home, and then you still were like breathing heavy, and you're like, man, I'm just like not getting my breath. And I remember walking back to the trailers or whatever, and Johnny was there, and he was talking to me for a minute, and I was like, you know what, man, I think I gotta like sit down or something. Like I just can't like catch my breath right now. And then I went up and I kind of sat on the couch, and something just wasn't right. I'm like, this is so weird that I'm not exerting myself anymore, but I still feel like I'm can't get my breath. And then the guys kind of noticed something wasn't right, and I kind of laid down on the couch. What was kind of unfortunate was the EMTs had all left the event early, so it actually took a long time for them to get me the help, which I was ready to decline. I didn't have insurance at the time, and I did not believe that. I was 49 years old. I did not think that I was having a heart attack. But when the paramedics showed up, they had done some quick tests, and they're like, this guy's got to come with us. Oh, no. And I was like, no, I can't afford this. And they're like, yeah, dude, you're going to die.
Don't have a choice.
Yeah. And it was heavy. You know what I mean? Like, you're on stage 1 minute, next thing you know, you're getting wheeled down a hallway, and they're about to take you into heart surgery, and you're not in your hometown. Right. The benefit to it happening there, this was near Cleveland, and even when they were on the way there, they're like, we could take you to this crappy hospital down the street, but we're going to take you to the best hospital in the whole country is here. We're going to go a little further to that one. And they took me there, and within like 30 minutes, I was on an operating table, and wow. Amazing surgeon just like put 3 stents in my heart. Like, wow. And then I basically had to head back home, which was a little sketchy because you're technically not supposed to be getting on airplanes and stuff like that after such an event. But I remember being concerned that someone would try to replace me, in the Pearcy band. So I was sure saying like, I will be back. I will not be missing any Pearcy shows. And like, we had a show 2 weeks later, and I was there.
You were there.
Yeah.
Wow. It's amazing. And you had a lot, you had 99% blockage, right?
Yeah, definitely. He was showing me like on the monitor, he's like, you see this? It was like, you could see it was like one of the biggest, main arteries of the heart. And you could see it went to this one spot about halfway down the heart and then just stopped. He's like, that's supposed to actually keep going into your heart. So that one was like almost a widowmaker kind of thing. And then there was another one that was really bad. And then there was a third artery that was getting bad, where he's like, man, sometimes we might have let that one go. But while I'm here, and I that was, of course, a life-saving blessing that those guys fixed me up there. The second life-saving blessing was that the state of California picked me up on insurance, and they retroactively paid for the surgery because it was like a $50,000 bill that would have bankrupted me,
right.
As a musician, it's so like sink or swim,
right.
You know what I mean? I did not have $50,000 to pay for. So I'm grateful to the state of California and to the hospital, and I'm here.
Yeah, and you're here, still doing it.
Still doing it. I had a cardiologist appointment yesterday, and we are going to do a test here in August just to kind of see where things are at, where they do the whole nuclear dye thing in there, and you get another stress test. But I feel better than I have in years. I don't expect to have another event like that. I do everything they tell me. I take my medications. Can't do cocaine was one thing they said. They're like,
can't
you
do cocaine,
you're gonna die.
Oh,
Because of
man,
beta.
that's a shame.
Yeah, right. Oh, damn it. No, I was never big into hard drugs, but you know, I'm kind of boring that way. I don't really party anymore for the most part, and I love to eat food. That's my kryptonite. You know what I mean? But
That'll get you.
when you get to be like 50, it's your metabolism slows down. So it's like that's the hardest thing I have right now is just not becoming a fat ass. You know?
Yeah. No, I hear you there.
You look like you're in really good shape.
Well, I don't know. I just started going to the gym. I will say that it's been 3 weeks straight, so it's going good so far. But, all right, man. Well, I'll let you go. I know we've been on a little bit here, but I appreciate it.
No, thank you so much. It was great talking to you, and I'll hope to come back anytime. If you ever want to come on Chris Aiken Presents, let us know.
We'd love to. All right.
Awesome.